a lonely father, two twin daughters, and a meeting scheduled by mistake. What began with a simple dish and a child's drawing sparked a story no one expected to witness. The sun was rising over San Francisco, painting the sky in orange hues that reflected on the waters of Lake View. For many, it was just another day, but for Matthew Harrison, it was the beginning of an experience that would change his life. Standing in front of the mirror in his closet, larger than many middle-class apartments, he observed his own image with a critical eye. There stood a 38-year-old man, with dark hair already showing some grey at the temples, deep brown eyes, and a tired expression that not even money could disguise. He felt his phone vibrate in his pocket. It was his assistant, Rebecca, with the day's schedule. 3 meetings with investors, a video conference with Chinese partners, and 2 contracts to sign. Matthew took a deep breath. As CEO of Harrison Logistics, one of the largest logistics companies in America, with branches on 3 continents, this had been his routine for more than a decade. But in the last 4 years, since the premature departure of his wife, Amanda, something had changed deeply within him. "Daddy, where's my lucky sock?" The voice of Emily, one of his 6-year-old twin daughters, pulled him from his thoughts. Beside her, Sophia, the other half of that perfect pair, was already completely dressed in her school uniform. "Did you look under the bed, Princess?" Matthew asked, bending down to be at the girl's height. Emily shook her head, her brown curls swinging from side to side. "Let's look together then." It was in these moments that Matthew felt truly alive. Not in meeting rooms, not at business dinners, not at charity events where his name always topped the list of major donors. It was in the simple act of searching for a lost sock, of braiding his daughter's hair, of making up bedtime stories. Mrs. Wilson, the housekeeper who had worked with the family for more than 20 years, appeared at the bedroom door with the missing sock. "It was in the dryer, sweetie. Come have breakfast, the driver is already waiting." As the girls went down for breakfast, Matthew returned to his closet. He looked at the rows of Italian suits, Egyptian cotton shirts, and custom-made shoes. Everything impeccable, everything perfect, everything empty of real meaning. He sat down in the leather armchair and closed his eyes for a moment. Since Amanda's passing, he had tried to move on, mainly for Emily and Sophia. He tried meeting new people, accepted some dates arranged by well-meaning friends, but it was always the same. Women who knew his last name before they even knew his first name. Superficial conversations filled with interest in his assets, calculated smiles that never reached their eyes. The last attempt had been particularly disastrous. A renowned dermatologist, a friend of one of the company's directors, who spent the entire dinner talking about her travels around the world and, coincidentally, mentioning her desire to visit the French Polynesia, where Matthew maintained a property. At the end of the night, when she suggested that his daughters would certainly love a maternal figure who could teach them how to behave in society, Matthew understood that it wouldn't lead anywhere. "Mr. Harrison, the girls are in the car and Mr. Gerald is on the phone, says it's urgent." Rebecca's voice through the intercom brought him back to reality. "Tell him I'll call back in half an hour," he replied, standing up with determination. At that moment, an idea began to form in his mind. A crazy idea, perhaps reckless, but one that wouldn't stop growing. After dropping the girls off at the exclusive school where they studied, with tuition that would cost many Americans a year's salary, Matthew asked the driver to drop him at the office and dismissed the car for the rest of the day. Sitting in his office with a view of the bay, he opened a private browser on his computer and typed the name of a dating app. "What am I doing?" he muttered to himself, but continued anyway. He created a simple profile without a last name, without mentioning his company or position. He put a recent but casual photo taken during a boat trip with his daughters. In the description, he wrote only, "Full-time dad, juice label reader, trying to figure out if I still know how to talk about something that doesn't involve Play-Doh." It was honest, straightforward, and completely disconnected from the business empire he commanded. For the first time in years, Matthew felt a strange excitement, as if he were about to embark on an unknown adventure. Throughout the day, between meetings and teleconferences, he discreetly checked the app. Some women had shown interest, but their profiles seemed as fabricated as the conversations he used to have at social events. Until, at the end of the afternoon, a name appeared on the screen. Olivia. The photo showed a woman of approximately 35 years, curly hair tied in an unpretentious bun, colorful framed glasses, and a genuine smile. Her description was simple: librarian at a community school, Lakeview resident, passionate about children's literature and silent walks. There was something about that profile that intrigued him. No mention of exotic travels, no photos on yachts or exclusive resorts, no references to luxury brands or starred restaurants. Just a woman who seemed comfortable in her own skin. Matthew sent a simple message. What was the last children's book that made you laugh out loud? And waited, without much expectation. To his surprise, the answer came minutes later. The Book with a Bite by Sylvia Ortiz. Makes adults laugh more than children, trust me. And you, what was the last juice label that left you perplexed? He smiled genuinely. The one that said it had 12% juice in a product called 100% natural juice. I think I need math lessons. The conversation flowed with a naturalness he hadn't experienced in years. Olivia didn't ask where he lived, what he did for a living, how much he earned. Instead, she asked about his daughters, about books, about small everyday things, and Matthew found himself answering honestly, without filters, without the need to impress. When she suggested dinner the next day, at a simple restaurant in Trinity District, known for serving homemade pasta on cracked porcelain plates, Matthew felt butterflies in his stomach. It was real. It was happening. He agreed immediately, promising to bring the twins since it would be his day with them. Perfect, replied Olivia. I love honest children. They are the best judges of character that exist. That night, lying in his king-size bed with Egyptian sheets, Matthew made a decision. Tomorrow, for the first time in many years, he would be just Matt. Not the CEO, not the millionaire, not the businessman coveted by the social columns. Just a man trying to reconnect with something real. And for that, he would need to leave the world of Matthew Harrison behind, even if just for one night. With that thought, he fell asleep with a smile on his lips, anticipating what fate had in store for him. The following morning arrived with a fine rain typical of San Francisco winters. Matthew woke up before the alarm, with a strange mixture of anxiety and excitement he hadn't felt since adolescence. While the twins were still sleeping, he went to the mansion's garage and observed his collection of imported cars. The black Porsche, the Mercedes SUV, the Audi sports car, none of them would serve for his little authenticity operation. Mr. Harrison, breakfast is served, announced Mrs. Wilson, appearing at the garage door. She looked confused at her boss, still in his pajamas, contemplating the automobiles. Any problem with the cars? No, Mrs. Wilson, just thinking, replied Matthew, distracted. Then, as if a light bulb went on in his mind, he turned to the housekeeper. Does Henry still have that old Chevy? Henry was the caretaker who looked after the house that had belonged to Matthew's mother, a historic property in downtown San Francisco that he kept intact for sentimental value. Yes, sir. That old thing you insist he doesn't sell? Mrs. Wilson replied with a raised eyebrow. But why do you want to know that first thing in the morning? I need to borrow it today, Matthew said, already walking back to the house. Oh, and Mrs. Wilson, today I will pick up the girls from school and we're going out for dinner. No need to prepare anything for us. The expression of astonishment on the housekeeper's face was priceless. In 4 years, Matthew had never dismissed the driver to pick up his daughters, much less announced they would dine somewhere other than the comfort of his mansion or some 5-star restaurant. During breakfast, Matthew explained to his daughters that they would have an adventure that night. Emily and Sophia were thrilled with the news, especially when their father mentioned they would meet a new friend. Is she your girlfriend, Daddy? Asked Sophia, with the cutting sincerity typical of children. No, sweetie. She's just a nice person Daddy met and wants to talk to more, he answered, feeling his cheeks redden as they hadn't in decades. Aunt Rebecca said you need a new girlfriend because you're too lonely after Mommy became a star in the sky, commented Emily, biting a toast with jelly. Matthew choked on his coffee. He would need to have a serious conversation with his assistant about what was appropriate to comment on with 6-year-old children. The day at the office flew by, with Matthew delegating tasks and reorganizing his schedule to leave earlier. At 3 in the afternoon, he discreetly left through the back door, avoiding Rebecca's curious gaze, and took a taxi to his mother's old house. Henry almost fell over when he saw his boss ask for the keys to the 2009 Chevy, a vehicle that completely diverged from the luxurious standard to which Matthew was accustomed. Even more surprising was when he asked to use the bathroom of the house and came out unrecognizable. Worn jeans he kept for possible works in the house, a basic white t-shirt, casual sneakers, and his hair tied in a small ponytail. "Are you all right, Mr. Harrison?" asked Henry, concerned. "Never been better, Henry," replied Matthew with an enigmatic smile. "Just need this to stay between us, okay?" The caretaker nodded, still perplexed as he watched his boss get into the old Chevy and leave, driving himself for the first time in years. Picking up the girls from school was an adventure in itself. The school inspector didn't recognize him immediately and almost didn't allow the children to leave until Emily shouted, "Daddy!" and ran in his direction. After a brief explanation and confirmation of identity by a teacher who knew him better, Matthew finally managed to leave with his daughters, who thought it was hilarious to ride in the small and noisy car. At 7 in the evening, the unlikely trio arrived at the restaurant in Trinity District. It was a simple place with wooden tables, handwritten menus, and a delicious smell of homemade tomato sauce. Nothing like the refined establishments that Matthew frequented. "Good evening, table for how many?" asked the receptionist, a friendly lady in a flowery apron. "3 for now, but we're waiting for one more person," replied Matthew, feeling his heart race. They were seated at a table near the window. Emily and Sophia immediately began to draw on the paper placemats that the restaurant offered for children, while Matthew checked his phone. No message from Olivia. Could it be that she had given up? As if answering his silent question, his phone vibrated. It was a notification from the dating app. "Sorry, can't have dinner with a father without structure. Good luck." Matthew felt a weight in his stomach. Without structure? What did that mean? Was it because he was with his daughters? Or had someone discovered who he was and told her some lie? He took a deep breath, trying to hide his disappointment. "Girls, I think we'll have to have dinner, just the 3 of us today. My friend won't be able to come," he said, forcing a smile. "But I want pasta," protested Sophia, pouting. "And we will have pasta, princess, just no daddy's friend." While trying to cheer up his daughters, the restaurant door opened, letting in a gust of cold wind and a woman shaking a wet umbrella. Matthew looked up and felt time stop. It was her, Olivia. With her curly hair a little damp from the rain, foggy glasses, and a shy smile as she looked for someone in the room. Their eyes met, and for a moment there was a flash of confusion on her face. Matthew was paralyzed. The message he had received, it didn't make sense. Olivia walked towards the table as if something instinctively pulled her there. "Are you Matt?" she asked hesitantly. He stood up, almost knocking over the chair. "Yes. And you must be Olivia. But I received a message saying you wouldn't come." Olivia frowned. "Message? I didn't send any message. My phone's been dead all afternoon. I came straight from the library." Before they could clarify the confusion, Emily interjected, "Are you Daddy's friend? Do you know how to draw cats? I love cats." Olivia looked at the girls, then back at Matthew, and something in her eyes softened. Without ceremony, she sat down next to Sophia. "Cats are my specialty, although they always come out a bit awkward," she replied, taking a colored pencil and starting to draw on the placemat. The next few minutes passed in a bubble of magic. Olivia talked with the twins as if she had known them for years, drew funny animals on napkins, laughed at childish jokes, and occasionally cast curious glances at Matthew, who watched everything with a mixture of admiration and incredulity. "So you work in a library?" he asked finally, when the girls were distracted with dessert. "Community library at Lake View," confirmed Olivia. "It's nothing grand, but we make a difference in the lives of many children who don't have access to books at home." "Must be rewarding." "It's real," she answered, after thinking a bit. "You know, without filters, without hidden agendas. The children either love you or hate you, and you always know where you stand." That phrase reverberated inside Matthew. Real. It was exactly what he was looking for, what was missing in his life, surrounded by artificialities. When the waiter brought the bill, Matthew felt a moment of panic. In his rush to appear as an ordinary man, he had forgotten to bring enough money. Just a few bills in the pocket of his jeans, which certainly didn't cover the value of the dinner. As he rummaged through his pockets, visibly embarrassed, Olivia noticed his discomfort. Without fanfare, she took her wallet from her purse and handed a card to the waiter. "Please put it all on my account." "No, I can't accept that," protested Matthew, mortified. "Consider it an investment," replied Olivia with an enigmatic smile. "You can pay next time." Next time. There would be a next time. That made Matthew's heart race again, but for completely different reasons than he was used to in his million-dollar negotiations. As they said goodbye on the sidewalk in front of the restaurant, with the rain still falling gently, Olivia bent down to hug the girls. Then she handed Matthew one of the napkins where she had drawn, carefully folded. "Let me know when you want to do this again," she said simply, before opening her colorful umbrella and walking down the wet street, leaving behind a man who, despite all his fortune, felt that he had just discovered a much more valuable treasure. On the folded napkin, besides the drawing of an awkward cat, there was a phone number and a small note. "Enjoyed meeting the man behind the amazing girls. No filters, no hidden agendas." Driving the old Chevy back home, with the twins asleep in the back seat, Matthew felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. In the days that followed, Matthew found himself divided between two worlds. By day, he was the relentless CEO, the man whose decisions moved millions in the financial market. At night and on weekends, he was just Matt, the single father who took his daughters to hear stories at the community library where Olivia worked. The library was an old colonial house in Lakeview, adapted to receive children of all ages and social classes. It had wooden shelves up to the ceiling, colorful beanbags scattered throughout the corners, and a lawn in the back where storytelling sessions took place on sunny days. A simple, welcoming place, without the ostentatious luxury to which Matthew was accustomed, but with a wealth of experiences that money couldn't buy. Emily and Sophia had instantly fallen in love with the place. For girls who only attended private schools and exclusive clubs, that mix of children from different realities was a fascinating novelty. They loved sitting in the circle formed around Olivia and listening to stories that made their little eyes shine with enchantment. Matthew, in turn, observed everything with a new perspective. He saw how Olivia treated each child with the same attention, regardless of whether they wore brand-name clothes or had worn-out sneakers. He saw how she knew each one by name, remembered their stories, their favorite books, and above all, he saw how she was genuinely respected and loved in that environment. "Did you always want to work with children?" asked Matthew one afternoon, while helping Olivia organize the books after a particularly busy session. The twins played on the lawn with other children, under the watchful eye of one of the volunteers. Olivia paused, a book of African tales in her hands, and smiled. "Not exactly. I wanted to be an archaeologist when I was a teenager. I dreamed of traveling the world, unearthing ancient civilizations." "And what happened?" "Life," she answered simply. "Some excavations are deeper than others." There was something in her tone, a veiled melancholy that made Matthew want to know more, but something told him it wasn't yet the right time to dig deeper into that story. In the following meetings, which became increasingly frequent, Matthew continued maintaining his farce. He always wore simple clothes, appeared in the borrowed Chevy, and avoided mentioning his work beyond vague comments about logistics and many meetings. It wasn't exactly a lie, but it was far from the complete truth. In compensation, in all other aspects, he allowed himself to be genuine. He talked about his fears as a solo parent, about the difficulties of raising two girls without a female presence, about the longing he felt to share the small victories and defeats of everyday life with someone. Olivia also opened up, but Matthew noticed that there were certain areas of her life carefully protected. She talked about her work, her favorite books, her passion for dawn walks, but rarely mentioned family or past relationships. On a Saturday afternoon, while the girls participated in a puppet workshop with other volunteers, Matthew and Olivia walked along the shore of Lake View, buying coconut water from a street vendor. "You never told me how you ended up at this library," commented Matthew casually. Olivia took a sip of coconut water before answering. "It was a fresh start. I worked at a big publishing house in New York, in the children's literature area. I earned well, had a nice apartment, but felt that there was a lack of purpose." She paused, looking at the horizon. "Then I had a, let's say, turning point in my personal life. I needed to rethink everything. A friend told me about this project here in San Francisco. I came to spend a weekend and ended up staying. At first as a volunteer, then they invited me to coordinate the space. And you don't regret it, having left everything behind?" Sometimes I miss the financial security, she admitted, with an ironic smile, but I wouldn't trade what I have here for anything. Money is important, Matt, but it's not everything. Those words hit Matthew like a punch in the stomach. He who had spent his life accumulating fortunes, expanding businesses, multiplying assets, now confronted someone who had chosen the opposite path. And the most disturbing part, she seemed genuinely happy with her choice. Weeks passed, and the relationship between them deepened with each meeting. They still hadn't crossed the physical barrier, just some hand touches, goodbye hugs that lasted a bit longer than necessary, glances that said more than words. There was a mutual respect, a slow and solid construction that neither wanted to rush. The twins, on the other hand, had already decided that Olivia was a permanent part of their lives. They talked about her constantly, drew her in their school assignments, asked to visit her even on days when there were no activities at the library. "Daddy, why doesn't Aunt Olivia come to dinner at our house?" asked Sophia during breakfast on a Sunday. Matthew almost choked on his juice. Taking Olivia to the mansion would mean revealing the truth about who he really was, and he wasn't ready yet to risk losing what they had built. "Aunt Olivia's house is closer to the library, Princess. It's easier for us to meet there," he answered, changing the subject. But the innocent question planted a seed of uneasiness. How much longer could he maintain that farce? And what would Olivia's reaction be when she discovered the truth? On a rainy Wednesday, Matthew decided to make a surprise. He left the office earlier, picked up the Chevy from the hideout he now kept in a parking lot near downtown to avoid questions from Henry, and went to the library with a bouquet of daisies. Olivia had mentioned they were her favorite flowers for being simple and sincere. Upon arriving, he found the place almost empty. A teenage volunteer explained that the storytelling of that day had been cancelled due to heavy rain. Matthew thanked her and was about to leave when he noticed the light on in the back office. He walked silently to it, wanting to make a surprise. The door was ajar, and he could see Olivia sitting at her desk, organizing some papers. He was about to knock when he noticed something that made him freeze, a framed photograph on the shelf behind her. In the image, a younger Olivia, with shorter hair, held a baby in her arms. Her smile was exhausted but radiant, the kind of deep happiness that only comes with the birth of a child. Matthew felt a lump in his throat. Why had she never mentioned that she had a child? Inadvertently, he let out an audible sigh, and Olivia turned around, surprised. "Matt, what are you doing here?" He entered the office, embarrassed at having been caught snooping. "Sorry, I wanted to make a surprise," he said, extending the slightly crumpled bouquet of daisies. Olivia's gaze oscillated between the flowers and the photograph that Matthew had clearly been observing. A heavy silence settled between them. "They're beautiful," she finally said, taking the bouquet. "Thank you." "Olivia, Matthew hesitated, not knowing how to ask about something so intimate and that she had clearly chosen not to share. She followed his gaze to the photograph, and her countenance changed. A shadow passed through her eyes, and for a moment, Matthew saw a vulnerability that she had always kept carefully hidden. "You want to know about the photo," said Olivia, not as a question, but as a statement. "Only if you want to tell me." Olivia placed the flowers on the desk and walked to the shelf, taking the frame. Her fingers caressed the glass with a tenderness that made Matthew's heart tighten. "Long story. A chapter I still haven't finished writing," she answered with a sad smile, repeating the same enigmatic phrase she had used when he asked about her coming to San Francisco. Matthew nodded, respecting her space. "When you're ready, if you want to share, I'll be here to listen." Something in her gaze transformed, a mixture of gratitude and something deeper, more complex. She put the frame back on the shelf and approached Matthew. "Thank you for not insisting," she said, lightly touching his face. "Most people can't handle silence, the unfinished parts of the story." "We all have our unfinished chapters," he replied, thinking of his own incomplete story, of the parts of himself he hid from her. At that moment, under the soft light of the office lamp, with the sound of rain hitting the old windows, something changed between them. Olivia came closer, her eyes fixed on his, and Matthew felt that all masks and pretensions were about to fall. The kiss was soft, hesitant at first, like a silent agreement that both were willing to risk, even without knowing each other's whole story. When they separated, Matthew knew he had crossed a point of no return, and that sooner or later he would need to reveal who he really was. "Let's get out of here," whispered Olivia. "I know a cafe nearby that makes the best hot chocolate in the city." As they left together into the rain, hand in hand, Matthew wondered if what they had built would be strong enough to bear the weight of the truth, and he also wondered what was the rest of the story that Olivia wasn't yet ready to tell. Autumn was advancing in San Francisco, tinting the leaves in golden and orange hues. The relationship between Matthew and Olivia was also flourishing, despite the secrets that both kept. The visits to the library became more frequent, as well as simple dinners, walks along the shore, and late afternoons watching the sunset at Lake View, always with Emily and Sophia nearby, increasingly attached to Aunt Olivia. In his office at the headquarters of Harrison Logistics, Matthew found himself distracted frequently, looking out the panoramic window with a silly smile on his lips, thinking about the librarian who had turned his world upside down. Rebecca, his faithful assistant for more than a decade, noticed the change in her boss, but had enough discretion not to comment, until on a Friday she couldn't contain her curiosity. "Mr. Harrison, excuse the intrusion, but you've been leaving earlier, arriving happier, cancelling important appointments. May I ask if everything is all right?" Matthew looked away from the window and smiled at Rebecca. "Everything is great, actually. I'm just realigning priorities." The assistant nodded, satisfied with the answer. "The girls are also different. Emily told me about your new friend, the librarian. She seems to be someone special." "She is," replied Matthew, feeling his face heat up. "But it's complicated." "Complicated why? She doesn't like successful men?" Rebecca joked. "That's precisely the problem. She doesn't know who I really am." Rebecca widened her eyes, incredulous. "What do you mean she doesn't know? You're Matthew Harrison. Your name is everywhere. Your face appears in business magazine." I kind of omitted some details about my professional life. "Some details, like the fact that you own one of the largest logistics companies in North America." Rebecca shook her head, visibly concerned. "Sir, with all due respect, this is not going to end well. Secrets of this size always come to light." Rebecca's words haunted him for the rest of the day. He knew he needed to tell Olivia the truth, but each passing day made the revelation more difficult. What if she walked away? What if she felt deceived, betrayed? The fear of losing what they had built paralyzed him. That night, upon returning home, Matthew went straight to the closet, where he kept the suit he had worn on the day he met Olivia. In the inner pocket, carefully folded, was the napkin with the drawing of the awkward cat she had made for the girls. That simple piece of paper had become a sort of talisman, a reminder that something true had been born from a well-intentioned lie. While admiring the drawing, he heard light footsteps behind him. It was Emily, already in pajamas, looking at him curiously. "What are you looking at, Daddy?" Matthew smiled and showed the napkin to his daughter. "A drawing that Aunt Olivia made on the day we met." Emily examined the paper carefully and then looked at her father with that serious expression that sometimes made her seem much older than her 6 years. "Why did you keep that, Daddy?" The question, so simple and direct, caught Matthew off guard. "Because some things need to be remembered," he answered, after a moment of reflection. Emily seemed to ponder the answer, and then, with the disconcerting wisdom of children, declared, "You really like her, don't you? Not like the other aunts who used to come here before." Matthew crouched down to be at his daughter's height. "How do you know that, little one?" "Because with her you laugh for real, and when we're with her you don't look at your phone all the time." Emily's simple words hit him like a revelation. It was true. With Olivia, he was present in a way he couldn't be in any other aspect of his life. She anchored him in the moment, in what really mattered. The next day, a sunny Saturday afternoon, Matthew took the girls for a picnic at Seashore Beach, where they would meet Olivia. She was already there when they arrived, sitting on a checkered blanket, with a wicker basket beside her and a book in her lap. Matthew's heart accelerated, as it always did when he saw her. Dressed in a simple cotton dress and with her curly hair loose in the wind, she emanated a natural beauty that no jewelry or designer clothes could match. "Aunt Olivia!" shouted the twins in unison, running in her direction. She opened her arms to receive them, laughing with the impact of the small bodies against hers. "My princesses, I brought a surprise for you," she said, opening the basket and revealing homemade cookies in animal shapes. While the girls were delighting in the cookies, Matthew and Olivia exchanged a discreet kiss, the kind that says, "I missed you," even after just 2 days without seeing each other. "You're different today," commented Olivia, observing him attentively. "Different how?" "I can't explain. Restless, maybe?" "Is something bothering you?" Matthew sighed. It was impressive how she could read him so well, even after such a short time. "Just thinking about some work things," he lied, immediately feeling guilty. Olivia nodded, but her look said she wasn't completely convinced. "You know what I think? That sometimes we complicate things too much. Life can be simple if we let it." "It's not always so easy to simplify," replied Matthew, thinking about the complexity of his situation. "True, but sometimes the complication is just in our head." She paused, looking at the girls who were now building a sandcastle. "You know what I learned working with children? They are the best judges of character because they see through the layers we build. For them, either you're good or you're not. Simple as that." That seemingly casual conversation touched something deep inside Matthew. Could it be that Olivia already knew, or at least suspected, that he was hiding something? Perhaps she was giving him the opportunity to open up on his own. The day passed peacefully with laughter, sandcastles, dives in the warm sea, and ice creams melting under the sun. It was one of those perfect moments that Matthew wished he could freeze in time. But the shadow of the unrevealed truth hung over him like a dark cloud on the horizon. When the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, the girls fell asleep, exhausted on the blankets. Matthew and Olivia sat side by side, observing the natural spectacle in a comfortable silence. "Matt," Olivia began, without diverting her eyes from the horizon, "do you believe that the past defines who we are?" The question caught him by surprise. "What do you mean?" "If our previous choices, our mistakes, our secrets, if they are who we really are, or if we can be something completely new each day." There was a vulnerability in her voice that made Matthew turn to her. "I think we are the sum of all that. The past shapes us but doesn't completely determine us." Olivia nodded slowly. "I've been thinking a lot about that lately. About how certain moments in life can change everything, about how we keep parts of ourselves hidden out of fear of how others would react if they knew." "Are you talking about yourself?" asked Matthew gently. She finally turned to face him, her eyes reflecting the last glow of the setting sun. "I'm talking about both of us. You have your secrets, Matt, and I have mine. The question is, are we ready to share them?" Matthew's heart raced. It was now. The moment he feared and longed for had arrived, but before he could answer, his phone vibrated. It was Henry, calling from an unknown number. "Sir, sorry to bother you, but we need to talk urgently. It's about the Chevy." "Henry, this isn't a good time." "Sir, the car was ticketed. The notification came here in my name, but the car was in a luxury parking lot downtown, the same one where your company's headquarters is." Matthew felt his blood freeze. The underground parking where he left the car was exclusive to high-level executives of Harrison Logistics. If Henry received the ticket, it meant that someone had noted the license plate and associated it with the caretaker's address. "I'll take care of it, Henry. Thanks for letting me know," he said, hanging up quickly. When he turned around, he realized that Olivia was observing him with an indecipherable expression. "Problems?" she asked. "Nothing major," he replied, tense. "Just an issue with a friend." The atmosphere between them subtly changed. The magic of the moment had dissipated, replaced by a sensation of unmet expectation. On the way back, with the girls asleep in the back seat, Matthew took Olivia to her apartment. It was the first time he had been there, a small duplex above a bookstore in the historic center, with a view of the sea. Simple, welcoming, full of books and plants, just as he had imagined it would be. "Want to come in?" invited Olivia as they arrived. Matthew looked at the sleeping girls. "I can't leave them alone in the car." "Of course," she agreed with an understanding smile. "Another time, then." As they said goodbye with a kiss, Olivia held Matthew's face between her hands, looking at him intensely. "Whatever it is you're hiding, Matt, remember, the truth always finds a way." Those words accompanied him throughout the journey back home. Upon entering the mansion, carrying the sleeping girls, Matthew was greeted by Mrs. Wilson with a concerned expression. "Mr. Harrison," Mr. Michael called several times. "Said it's urgent." Michael was the company's lawyer, an old friend of his father and long-time advisor. Urgent calls from him were never a good sign. "I'll call back as soon as I put the girls to bed," he replied, climbing the stairs with Emily in his arms, while Mrs. Wilson carried Sophia. Half an hour later, locked in his personal office, Matthew heard Michael's grave voice on the speakerphone. "Matt, we have a problem. Richard Mendoza is approaching a librarian in San Francisco, the same name you mentioned the other day, Olivia Martin." Richard Mendoza was a partner of Harrison Logistics' main competitor and Olivia's ex-boyfriend, as Matthew would discover next. The business world was too small, and San Francisco even smaller. "What do you mean by approaching?" asked Matthew, feeling a pang of jealousy mixed with concern. "He sought her out at the library today. My contact saw them talking at length, and from what I could gather, they have a past together, a complicated past." Matthew felt his stomach sink. What else was there about Olivia that he didn't know, and what could Richard have said to her? The answer came the next morning, in the form of a direct and straightforward message. "We need to talk. I know who you are, Matthew Harrison, and I think you also know who I really am." The truth, as Olivia had predicted, had finally found its way. Matthew stared at Olivia's message on his phone as if it were a strange and dangerous object. His hands trembled slightly, his throat dry. The moment he had so feared had arrived. He took a deep breath and replied, "Where can we meet?" The answer came almost instantly. "At Eagles Peak Lookout, at 3 p.m., alone." Eagles Peak Lookout was a tourist spot that offered a panoramic view of San Francisco. A public place, but with spaces sufficiently private for a difficult conversation. Matthew cancelled all meetings for that day, to Rebecca's surprise, who had never seen him prioritize personal matters over business. "Are you all right, sir?" she asked, genuinely concerned. "I will be," replied Matthew, without much conviction. "At least I hope so." At exactly 3 o'clock, Matthew parked his Porsche in the Lookout's parking lot. There was no more reason to pretend. If Olivia already knew who he was, it was time to present himself as he really was. Matthew Harrison, CEO, billionaire, single father. A man who had fallen in love with who she was, not with what she had or represented. He spotted Olivia sitting on a more secluded bench, looking at the horizon. She wore simple jeans and a blue t-shirt, her hair tied in an unpretentious bun. Even from a distance, Matthew could notice the tension in her shoulders, the rigidity in her posture. "Hi," he said, approaching cautiously. Olivia turned around, her eyes meeting his. There was no anger in her gaze, just a deep disappointment that made Matthew's heart sink. "So it's true," she said, observing him from top to bottom, noticing the impeccable suit he was wearing, so different from the simple clothes he used in their meetings. "You really are Matthew Harrison, the logistics magnate?" It wasn't a question, but Matthew nodded anyway. "Yes, and you've always been Olivia Martin, the librarian who made me see the world in a different way." She let out a tired sigh. "Why, Matt? Why all this charade? What were you trying to prove?" It was a fair question, for which he had been rehearsing the answer since he began this farce. Even so, the words seemed inadequate. "I wanted to know if someone could be interested in me, not in my money, not in my last name, not in what I can offer materially. I wanted to be seen as a person, not as a bank account." Olivia shook her head, incredulous. "And for that you needed to lie? Do you have any idea how I feel now, like a guinea pig in a social experiment?" "It wasn't like that," protested Matthew, taking a step in her direction. She raised her hand, preventing him from coming any closer. "No? Then please explain to me how it was, because from my point of view, you used me to satisfy some simple life fantasy while keeping your empire intact. You played at being poor, Matt, knowing you could return to your mansion at any moment." Her words hit him like a slap. There was truth there, an uncomfortable truth that he hadn't wanted to see. Even so, he needed her to understand his reasons. "I didn't start with the intention of lying for so long," he explained, sitting on the bench beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. "It just happened. First the meeting at the restaurant, then the visits to the library. The more I got to know you, the more afraid I was of losing what we were building." "And what exactly did you think we were building on a foundation of lies?" The question hung between them, heavy as lead. Matthew closed his eyes for a moment, searching for the right words. "Something true," he finally answered. "Paradoxical, I know, but what I feel for you, what the girls feel, that was never a lie." Olivia remained silent for a long moment, observing the city below. When she spoke again, her voice was more controlled, almost clinical. "Richard told me everything yesterday. Not just about you, but about how he had sources that confirmed our involvement. Apparently we're a subject in San Francisco's social circles." She let out a bitter laugh. "The librarian and the billionaire. Almost a romantic comedy, isn't it?" "Richard Mendoza is not reliable," said Matthew, feeling jealousy corrode his stomach. "What else did he tell you?" Olivia faced him directly. "He said that you are fierce competitors, that you would do anything to harm him, including using people close to him. And you believed that?" The indignation in Matthew's voice was genuine. "I don't know what to believe anymore, Matt. Until yesterday, I thought I was falling in love with a single father who drove an old Chevy and worked with logistics in some average office. Today I discover that you own half the city." "It's not quite like that." "It doesn't matter," interrupted Olivia, exasperated. "The point is that you deceived me. Deliberately. And the worst part is that I should have noticed. The car that never broke down despite being so old. The latest generation cell phone that you said you won in a promotion. The way you always paid in cash, never with a card. There were so many signs." Matthew couldn't deny it. He had left clues all along the way, trusting that Olivia was as involved as he was to not question them. "What hurts me the most," she continued with a choked voice, "is that I was ready to tell you everything about me, about my past, about—" She paused, swallowing hard. "About my son." The mention of Olivia's son made Matthew remember the photograph in her office. The missing piece of the puzzle. "You can tell me now," he said softly. "I'm ready to listen." Olivia closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength. "Jacob. That's his name. He's 8 years old and lives with my parents in Portland." Matthew nodded, encouraging her to continue. "I had him young, the result of a relationship with Richard. Yes, that same Richard Mendoza you know from business." She let out a heavy sigh. "When I got pregnant, he made it very clear that a child didn't fit into his plans. He offered money for a procedure, but I refused. I decided to have my child alone." Matthew listened attentively, his heart tight with the evident pain in her voice. "It wasn't easy. I worked at the publishing house during the day, did freelance jobs at night, slept few hours. When Jacob was 4 years old, I had a collapse, physical and emotional exhaustion. My parents convinced me to leave him with them temporarily, until I recovered. But when I was ready to have him back, Richard reappeared." Olivia paused, her hands trembling slightly. Matthew resisted the urge to hold them. He had married the daughter of an influential businessman, was beginning to build his empire. Suddenly he decided that he wanted to be part of the life of the son he had denied for years. He filed for joint custody, claiming that I didn't have the adequate conditions to properly raise Jacob. "He had no right to do that," protested Matthew, indignant. "Legally, he did. I never denied paternity. His name is on the birth certificate. And in practice, he could offer much more than I could. Private school, premium health insurance, international travels, things that my editor's salary could never provide." The story was beginning to make sense. The sudden move to San Francisco, the work at the community library, the reluctance to talk about her past. "Is that why you left New York? To escape from him?" Olivia shook her head. "To rebuild myself. The custody dispute process broke me in so many ways. Richard used everything against me. My work hours, the size of my apartment, even the fact that I didn't have a partner to share parental responsibilities. And what happened? We reached an agreement. Jacob would stay with my parents during the school year, since his school is in Portland, and would spend the holidays with me. Richard would have the right to bi-weekly visits and a few weeks during the holidays. It wasn't what I wanted, but it was the best I could do to protect my son from a prolonged legal battle." Matthew felt a profound admiration for this woman who had sacrificed so much for her son's well-being, and he felt ashamed for having hidden his truth when hers was infinitely more painful and complex. "I'm building a life here, Matt," continued Olivia. "A safe place for me and, eventually, for Jacob. The library isn't just a job, it's a purpose. I'm doing something meaningful, something that makes me proud. And then you appear with your well-intentioned lies, and suddenly I'm again the center of gossip and speculation." "What do you mean?" Olivia took her phone from her pocket and showed the screen to Matthew. It was a photo of her with the twins at the beach, taken the day before with the headline, The new stepmother of the billionaire twins? This came out this morning in one of those gossip blogs, she explained. Richard made a point of sending me the link, with a very solicitous message warning that my involvement with public figures could negatively impact the custody agreement we have. Matthew felt his blood boil. He's threatening you. He's reminding me of reality, which is exactly what I should have done with myself before getting involved with you. Because that's the truth, Matt. We live in different worlds. Your world is of business magazines, social columns, and paparazzi. Mine is of children's books, volunteering, and a daily struggle to prove that I'm a good mother. Silence fell heavily between them, only the sound of the wind and the occasional trilling of birds filling the void. In the distance, dark clouds were beginning to form, announcing a storm. "We don't have to live in separate worlds," said Matthew finally, his voice almost a whisper. "I can be part of your world. I can help you with Jacob. Face Richard together." "And how do you think that would end?" Olivia interrupted him with a sad laugh. "The powerful Matthew Harrison against the influential Richard Mendoza, with the poor librarian in the middle? It would only make everything more complicated for Jacob. You don't know me as well as you think, Olivia. I'm not the type of man who uses power and influence to crush others." "No? Then why did your assistant call me this morning offering a financial compensation for me to discreetly move away from you and your daughters?" Matthew felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. "Rebecca did what?" "Oh, you didn't know?" Olivia's tone was mordant. "She offered me, let me see if I remember the exact words, a substantial amount to avoid any public embarrassment for the Harrison family. Apparently, I'm a threat to your immaculate reputation." "I never authorized that," affirmed Matthew, horrified. "I would never ask her or anyone to keep you away from me. On the contrary, He hesitated, the words stuck in his throat. "You what, Matt?" "I'm in love with you," he confessed finally. "For who you are. For what you represent. For the way you treat my daughters. For your strength, your determination. I've never met anyone like you, and I doubt I will again." Silent tears were now streaming down Olivia's face. "I wish I could believe that. It's the truth. The only truth that matters. The truth is also that your world is already swallowing me, Matt. I received a call from the library board today. One of the major donors, coincidentally linked to a company that competes with yours, threatened to withdraw the funds if I continue to attract unwanted attention. They didn't explicitly fire me, but made it clear that my presence now is a problem." Matthew clenched his fists tightly. Richard was using his influence to hurt Olivia, and indirectly him. It was low, even by business standards. "I can solve this. I can make a larger donation, guarantee your job, your security." "You don't understand, do you?" Olivia interrupted him, exasperated. "I don't want to be solved with your money. I don't want to be just another problem that the powerful Matthew Harrison solves with his checkbook. I built my life without depending on anyone, and I intend to continue that way." She stood up, adjusting her bag on her shoulder. "I need time, Matt. Space to think about what all this means for me, for Jacob, for our future." Matthew also stood up, feeling that he was losing her with each second. "The girls, they miss you." It was a low blow, and he knew it. But it was true. Emily and Sophia asked about Olivia constantly, drew her in their school assignments, kept small treasures to show her on the next visit. Olivia's face contorted in pain. "Don't do that. Don't use your wonderful daughters to manipulate me. They also mean a lot to me. Then don't disappear completely. We can find a middle ground, a path that respects your need for space, but that doesn't cut all ties." Olivia took a deep breath, looking at the horizon. The first drops of rain were beginning to fall, cold against warm skin. "I'm going to step away for a while," she finally said. "I'm going to visit Jacob in Portland, think about what to do with my work here, reorient my life. When I come back, if I come back, I'll get in touch." "If you come back?" The possibility that she could permanently leave his life made Matthew feel a void in his chest. "I don't have all the answers now, Matt. I just know that I need to protect myself, and more importantly, protect my son." With these words, she turned and began to walk towards the exit of the lookout. The rain was increasing, but she didn't seem to care, moving forward with her shoulders erect. The same determination that had captivated him from the beginning. Matthew observed her leave, paralyzed by impotence. All his money, all his power, all his influence. None of it mattered at that moment. For the first time in his adult life, he faced a problem that couldn't be solved with material resources. And the sensation was devastating. The raindrops were mixing with the silent tears on his face when he finally whispered to the wind, "I'll find you wherever you are when you're ready." But Olivia was already too far away to hear. 3 weeks passed since the confrontation at Eagle's Peak Lookout. For Matthew, they were the longest days of his life. Each morning upon waking, he checked his phone, expecting a message that never came. Each time the phone rang in the office, his heart accelerated, only to decelerate again when he heard any voice that wasn't hers. The twins felt Olivia's absence deeply. In the first days, they asked about her constantly. When are we going to see Aunt Olivia? Why doesn't she come to tell stories anymore? Doesn't she like us anymore? Each question was a stab in Matthew's heart, who tried to explain in the gentlest way possible that sometimes adults needed time to sort out their things. Emily, always the most perceptive of the two, looked at her father with those eyes that seemed to see into his soul. "You fought with her, didn't you, Daddy?" she asked one night as he was putting them to bed. Matthew hesitated, sitting on the edge of the mattress. "It wasn't exactly a fight, Princess. It was more a misunderstanding. Like when Sophia and I fight over the last cookie?" asked Sophia, hugging her teddy bear. Matthew smiled, despite the sadness. "A bit more complicated than that, but the idea is similar." "When we fight, Aunt Rebecca says we need to talk and apologize," observed Emily seriously. "Did you apologize to Aunt Olivia?" The innocent question hit Matthew like a ray of clarity. He had respected Olivia's request for space, not attempting direct contact, but he also hadn't explicitly asked for forgiveness. Not in a way that demonstrated true remorse and understanding for what he had done. "I'll do that, little one, I promise." The next day, after dropping the girls at school, Matthew drove to the community library in Lakeview. It was closed for renovation, according to a sign on the door. Through the windows, he could see empty shelves and stacked boxes. His stomach sank. Was Olivia preparing to leave San Francisco permanently? Determined to find out more, he entered the bookstore below her apartment. The owner, an elderly lady with colorful framed glasses, recognized him immediately. "Mr. E. Harrison, what a surprise to see you here," she said with a polite but reserved smile. "Good morning, Mrs." He hesitated, realizing he had never formally introduced himself to the owner. "Eleanor. Mrs. Eleanor. But you didn't come here to talk to me, I imagine," she commented, adjusting her glasses. "If you're looking for Olivia, she's in Portland. She went to visit her son." So Jacob was indeed in Portland, as Olivia had said. For some reason, confirming this piece of the story made Matthew feel slightly relieved. At least in this, she hadn't lied. "Do you know when she'll be back?" Mrs. Eleanor studied him for a moment, as if assessing his intentions. "I don't know for sure. She asked me to keep her belongings here while she decides what to do. The library board put her on administrative leave after that newspaper article about you two." Guilt weighed even more on Matthew. He had inadvertently caused damage to her career, to the place she considered a refuge. "I see. If you speak with her, could you tell her I stopped by, that I would really like to talk when she returns?" Mrs. Eleanor nodded, without promising anything. Before leaving, Matthew bought a children's book about forgiveness and new beginnings. It seemed appropriate somehow. Back at the office, Matthew made 2 important decisions. First, he called Rebecca to his room. "Rebecca, I need to know exactly what you said to Olivia Martin," he said, without beating around the bush as soon as the assistant sat down. Rebecca's face paled. "Sir, I just thought that I didn't ask you to think. I asked you to tell me what you said to her," interrupted Matthew with a coldness he rarely demonstrated. Rebecca straightened in the chair. "I called to inform her that her association with you was generating unwanted buzz and offered financial help so that she could re-establish herself in another city, away from public scrutiny." "And who authorized you to do that?" "No one, sir. I took the initiative because I thought I would be protecting the interests of the Harrison family, as I always have." There was a defensive tone in her voice. Matthew took a deep breath, controlling his anger. "How long have you worked for me, Rebecca?" 12 years, sir. In all those years, have I ever asked you to remove someone from my life or my daughters using money?" Rebecca lowered her eyes. "No, sir. Then why did you think it would be different this time?" "Because," she hesitated, choosing her words, "because you seemed really involved with her. And people like us, like you, need to be careful about who they let into their lives. Matthew raised an eyebrow. People like us. People with assets to protect, sir, with a reputation to uphold. At that moment, Matthew understood that part of the problem was precisely this mentality. Not just his, but that of the entire circle that surrounded him. The idea that money separated him from the rest of the world, that his fortune needed to be protected from common people who could take advantage of it. "Rebecca, you're fired," he said, surprising himself with the sudden decision. The assistant's eyes widened in shock. "Sir, please, it was an error in judgment." "Yes, it was. A serious error that caused damage to a person who meant a lot to me and my daughters. I can no longer trust you." After Rebecca left, silent tears streaming down her face, Matthew made his second decision. He called his lawyer. "Michael, I need you to make an anonymous donation to the Lakeview Community Library. Value sufficient to cover the complete renovation of the building, plus funds for reading incentive programs for the next 5 years. Anonymous donation? Are you sure? You always like to be present at the ceremonies for these contributions." "I'm sure. And one more thing, I want you to get in touch with Jacob Martin in Portland. He's 8 years old, lives with his grandparents. Find out discreetly if he and the family need anything." Michael hesitated on the other end of the line. "Jacob Martin? Does he have any relation to that librarian?" "He's her son. And I don't want anyone to know that I'm investigating." In the following days, Matthew immersed himself in work, trying not to constantly think about Olivia, but failing miserably. The girls were also quieter than normal, especially during reading sessions before bed. On a Saturday afternoon, while observing Emily and Sophia drawing at the living room table, an idea began to form in his mind. "Girls, you miss Aunt Olivia, don't you?" Both nodded vigorously. "How about we write a letter to her saying how we feel that we miss her?" The twins' eyes brightened at the suggestion. Soon they were surrounded by colored pencils, glitter, stickers, and sheets of paper. Matthew let them work alone, wanting the message to be genuinely theirs, without his adult interference. When they finished, they proudly showed the result: a letter with drawn hearts, colorful flowers, and a simple but profound message. "If you go away, our hearts will be sad every day." Matthew felt his eyes water. "It's perfect, princesses. We'll send it to her." "No," protested Sophia. "Let's deliver it personally, like a surprise." Emily agreed enthusiastically. "We can stick it on the gate of her building, like a special surprise when she comes back." The idea was so pure and full of hope that Matthew didn't have the heart to say no. On Sunday morning, the three headed to the small building above the bookstore. Mrs. Eleanor saw them arrive and came out to greet them. "Mrs. Eleanor," said Matthew respectfully, "I know Olivia hasn't returned yet, but the girls made a letter for her and would like to leave it at the gate for when she returns." The lady looked at the twins with their hopeful little faces, and her countenance softened. "Of course you can. In fact, I think you won't have to wait long." Matthew frowned. "What do you mean?" "Olivia arrived last night. She's upstairs arranging some things. Mrs. Eleanor hesitated, as if she didn't know if she should continue. "She what?" asked Matthew, feeling his heart race. "She brought her son. Jacob is with her this time." The information hit Matthew like a wave. Olivia had brought Jacob to San Francisco. Did that mean she was planning to stay? Or had she just come to get her belongings, with her son in tow? Before he could fully process, the building door opened, and a familiar figure appeared. Olivia looked tired, with soft circles under her eyes, but still as beautiful as he remembered. Beside her, holding her hand, was a boy with dark curly hair with the same expressive eyes as his mother. For a moment, everyone was paralyzed in surprise. Then, the twins broke the silence. "Aunt Olivia!" they shouted in unison, running in her direction with the letter raised in their little hands. Olivia automatically crouched down, receiving the girls in a tight hug. Her eyes met Matthew's over the girl's hair, a mixture of surprise and something else he couldn't identify. "Emily, Sophia, I've missed you so much," she said with a choked voice. "This is Jacob, my son." The boy, shy, partially hid behind his mother, but briefly waved to the twins. "We made a letter for you," announced Emily, handing over the colorful paper, "to say we miss you." Olivia took the letter with trembling hands, reading the simple and direct message. Her eyes filled with tears. I missed you a lot too, little ones. Matthew remained standing a few meters away, respecting the space she had asked for, letting the children have their moment. Jacob observed him curiously, probably trying to understand who this man was, who made his mother react so emotionally. Finally, Olivia stood up and turned to Matthew. I wasn't expecting to see you so soon. I wasn't expecting you to return so quickly, he replied, with a nervous half-smile. A silence loaded with expectation hung between them. It was Jacob who broke it. Mom, are these the twins you told me about? The ones who like your blue mermaid stories? Olivia blushed slightly. Yes, son, Emily and Sophia. And this is... She hesitated, looking at Matthew. I'm their father, completed Matthew, bending down to be at the boy's height. Very nice to meet you, Jacob. Your mother speaks very highly of you. The boy extended his hand formally, in a gesture that seemed rehearsed. Nice to meet you. My mom also talked about you. She said you keep drawings on napkins. Matthew couldn't help but smile. So Olivia had talked about him to her son. That meant something, didn't it? Jacob, called Mrs. Eleanor from the bookstore door, how about coming to see the new collection of dinosaur books that arrived yesterday? You can bring the girls along. The boy looked at his mother, silently asking permission. Olivia nodded. Go ahead, but behave yourselves. Emily and Sophia, obey Mrs. Eleanor, okay? As soon as the children entered the bookstore, Olivia and Matthew found themselves alone on the sidewalk, each on one side of an invisible abyss that seemed at once immense and insignificant. You brought Jacob, commented Matthew finally. Olivia nodded. I decided it was time for him to know my life here, to see if it could work. And the library. I heard you were on leave. I was readmitted, she replied with a small smile. Apparently, an anonymous donor made a significant contribution with the condition that I continue coordinating the project. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? Matthew maintained a neutral expression. I have no idea what you're talking about. Olivia shook her head, but there was a trace of amusement in her eyes. Of course not, she hesitated, playing with the hem of her blouse. And your assistant? How is she? Fired, replied Matthew simply. Olivia's eyes widened. Because of me? Because of her. For making decisions that weren't hers to make. For believing that money solves everything. For reflecting a mentality that I no longer want in my life. Olivia absorbed the information in silence. Then, to Matthew's surprise, she took a step in his direction. These 3 weeks gave me a lot of time to think. And what did you conclude? He asked, barely daring to breathe. That I'm tired of running. From Richard, from the past, from frightening possibilities. I want Jacob to have a stable life, with people who love him for who he is, not for what he represents. She paused, carefully choosing her words. I also realized that, despite how everything started, what we've been building is real, and that perhaps it's worth trying. Matthew's heart seemed about to explode with hope. I'm so sorry, Olivia. More than I can express. I shouldn't have lied. I should have trusted that you would see me beyond the money, beyond the name. And I shouldn't have run away when I discovered the truth. I should have given you the chance to explain, to redeem yourself. I think we both have old wounds that make us fear vulnerabilities. Matthew extended his hand, hesitant, and Olivia accepted it. The touch was like coming home after a long journey. I can't promise it will be easy, she said, serious. Richard is still in Jacob's life, still has influence. People will still talk about us, invent stories, make judgments. I don't care what they say, as long as you and Jacob are okay. As long as Emily and Sophia can have you in their lives. The rest we can face together. Olivia smiled, that genuine smile that had captivated Matthew from the first meeting. One step at a time? One step at a time, he agreed. From the bookstore door, 3 curious little faces were observing them. Jacob, Emily, and Sophia, a new constellation of possibilities that none of them had foreseen, but that now seemed as natural as the sunrise. Matthew knew there was still much to be resolved. The relationship with Richard, Jacob's adaptation to a new reality, the balance between their so different worlds. But at that moment, with Olivia's hand in his and the sound of the children's laughter in the background, he understood what it meant to be truly rich. It wasn't the stocks, the properties scattered around the world, or the luxury cars in the garage. It was the ability to genuinely connect with another human being, to build something that no fortune could buy. Trust, respect, love. Olivia gently squeezed his hand as if reading his thoughts. "Shall we go in? I think the children have already planned the next month of our lives." Matthew laughed, feeling lighter than he had in years. "Leading by example, isn't it? Letting the children show the way." "Sometimes," replied Olivia with a mischievous sparkle in her eyes, "they really do know what matters." As they walked together to the bookstore, Matthew reflected on the extraordinary journey that a simple decision had triggered. Pretending to be someone he wasn't had, ironically, led him to discover who he really was. And, in the process, he had found someone who saw him not for the fortune he possessed, but for the heart he offered. Life, he concluded, had a peculiar way of giving us exactly what we needed, even when we thought we were looking for something completely different.